And so this is SIG Apps for Monday, January 23rd, 2017. And remind everyone, this is recorded and will be posted online. Today we have Jason here to help us with a retrospective. And this is something I appreciate, having somebody come in from the outside to help us with it, because that means it lets Michelle and myself participate, get feedback, and be able to hear it without being a moderator and doing that. And so it's great to be part of it in a different way by having that outside person. So Jason, are you there?
I am. And thanks, Matt, for the handoff, and also to Matt and Michelle for inviting me to help do this. This is something that we've seen a lot of success thus far with the last three Kubernetes releases. And I'm pretty proud to say we've seen a lot of incremental improvement between releases as people have taken note of the things in the retrospectives that could be addressed moving forward. So for those who haven't really done a retrospective, which probably everybody here has, but I'll just give it a quick rundown. What was that? Somebody might need to be. I'm sorry. So just to go over this quickly, the intent of a retrospective is to identify things that maybe didn't go as well, some things that went well, and then most importantly, what are the things that we learned through this last release cycle that we can apply moving forward that will make the next one better. A trap that a lot of people fall into with retrospectives is that it turns into a argument or everybody's complaining, that sort of thing, and it doesn't really go anywhere. So my request from people in the community is to simply look at things in as positive light as possible and feel like if you weren't happy how something went, let's focus on how to change it. And that'll give us another data point as we move through the next release to make it better. So I'd really invite everybody in the room to be as positive as possible and as respectful, and to go into the document that is linked in the chat channel to add your items that you feel like went well and didn't go well. So in that regard, one request is if you do put something that didn't go well, if you could put your initials at the end of that and then claim it as we go through the list, that would be great. Because that way I don't have to speak for you, you can speak to your point, and we can have a more direct conversation about it. Same with the deltas. So what I'll do is we have some time boxes there. We're already at the time box for the intro and working agreements, so let's move forward to what went well. And I would love for either people to put things in the document directly, or to maybe say them in the channel or in the video, and we can maybe note those in the document ourselves. But let's go ahead and kick it off. I'm really excited to hear what kind of things people have to say. So I'll open the floor to anybody who wants to speak to what went well.
I think we saw lots of really neat demos.
And to maybe expand on that just a touch, what were the qualities that you think helped make the demos really good? What was specifically about them? Were they particularly useful, or were they things that maybe the community hadn't seen before, or what? Can you expand on that just a touch?
I think I just got to learn a lot from the people who were creating the particular tools or working on particular features, and I really enjoyed that. It was short. It was like 10 minutes or 15 minutes, and it just was a nice little digestible piece of information. And it's always nice to learn something new, or how people are using particular tools or Kubernetes features.
Great. Looks like there's something here about Helm, the project merged PRs rapidly. Anybody want to speak to that?
I think this was Matt Butcher's comment or Adam's comment, but okay. I'll speak to that. Yeah, we saw lots of contributions. I think Helm hit 100 contributors, the Helm project did. And it was just nice to get a lot of community input. And it wasn't like PRs were sitting there for a long amount of time. So that was nice.
Great. Okay. So we've got 20 people on and a lot of silence. I'm sure everybody wants to get into the improvements as much as I do, but I definitely would love to know if there's any more shout outs. Were there any key players in the project this time around that stepped up? Anybody want to recognize anyone else?
Clayton did a really good job of the 1.5, like kicking off the 1.5 planning. And I believe Eric Chan helped with that as well. So I appreciate their input.
Okay, so pasting the retrospective doc in chat one more time because Zoom, when you join, you don't get to see the prior chat. So for those who just joined, if you could look at this document that I just pasted a link to in chat, and Michelle did as well. Right now we're at the what went well section, and if you want to add any items there, we can definitely discuss those.
I think Compose also got into Incubator during this cycle. Is that right, Tomas?
Yeah, it was during the cycle.
That was a cool thing that happened. It was the first project to be championed in the Incubator by SIG Apps.
Great. All right, so pretty much crickets. Sometimes the first retro is a little awkward. So if we move forward, anybody wants to add anything in the what went well section, we can definitely do that retroactively. So without further ado, let's get into the what might have gone better. Again, we want to focus on things in as positive light as possible. We know there are a lot of frustrations this release cycle, so let's go ahead and get into those. Start with Helm. Started migration to 1.5 too late. And this is not claimed, but I'm sure somebody can speak to this.
I'm pretty sure I'm the one who added that in.
Okay.
Something we had talked about on the core team. So even if it wasn't me who added it, I feel like I can articulate it pretty well.
Okay, great.
We just got started on our 1.5 migration a little bit later than we should have. We were not watching carefully when it went from alpha to beta, and we really probably should have started on it a little bit earlier in alpha, but because we were so focused on getting some of the features for 2.1 finished, we were caught a little bit flat-footed when right before the 1.5 went stable. And as a result of that, in spite of the fact that there weren't a lot of huge changes, there were enough changes that we had to scramble, then cut a release a little earlier than we planned to coincide with the 1.5 release, and then sort of discover after the fact that there were a few things that had slipped through untested.
Are there any aspects of what we learned from that we should bring into 1.6 and 4? What is the takeaway in terms of improvement?
I think our main takeaway, and if Adam is on, he can speak to this too, because he and I have talked about this a few times, but I think our main takeaway is that we want to bump up, we want to stay more aware of when Kubernetes hits its alpha cycle, and we feel like alpha is generally the stability marker where we should start testing the library migrations and things like that. Is there anything else, Adam, if you're on? I know Adam's had internet trouble all morning because it's raining in California.
Oh boy.
Yeah, apparently that doesn't happen very often these days, so it's a good thing. But anyway, so yeah, this time around we're going to try to jump in during the alpha cycle instead of waiting till beta 1 to start migration, because the beta tracks are unpredictably fast at times, and that's a good thing.
Okay, great. So there's the thing here about the surprise by the image pull policy breaking, which broke most charts. Anybody want to speak to that?
I'm not someone who put that up, but I can speak to that specifically. So if Helm manifests before, it was not a mandatory field on the actual or on a Kubernetes chart itself or on the manifest. Mm-hmm. But if you did upgrade from 1.4 to 1.5 with the exact same manifest, and it did not set an image pull policy, because in 1.4 it was assumed, I think it was if not present by default. And so if you upgraded and you did not set an image pull policy by default, then it broke for you. It was just a backwards incompatible change on the API side of things that caused a little bit of a headache on the Kubernetes charts side of things. So there was a bunch of PRs that had to be made on the charts themselves to make sure that they set the image pull policy, at least by default to if not present, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. So in terms of that dynamic that led to that, was that a failure or something in the community where the backward breaking change wasn't communicated at the SIG level, or do we have an idea about what maybe allowed that to happen in the first place?
Personally, I'm I'm not quite sure on the Kubernetes development side of things on the communication side. It was just a surprising bug that caught us all off, and I think that was more of the fact of just from the chart side of things, it was less so testing the migration from 1.4 to 1.5, and it was just testing right when 1.5 was released, and testing the charts against those. I'm not sure if it was an intentional bug or not, so I'm not sure on the communication side of things.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I can add to that for a moment.
Yeah.
I think that whether it was a bug or feature of Kubernetes isn't quite the most important issue in my mind. The most important issue was that in spite of the fact that we, basically that we had dozens and dozens of charts that were impacted out of the gate, and we didn't know until the release went live. Michelle, do you want to talk about what has been discussed for avoiding that problem? Or because I'm a little behind on that.
Yeah, I believe we're going to start testing all charts on particular versions of Kubernetes earlier. Eric, do you want to talk about it?
So I think we envision obviously charts repo has its own CI, CD, and by the end of this quarter, 1.6, we hope to have in the Kubernetes repo CI that runs relatively recent versions of charts against head Kubernetes. And so we would have detected that if we'd had that. So that's our plan.
Is there any kind of support or visibility or anything that the community at large can do to help fix that problem, or is the CI feel like it's going to be a good enough solution to test for this next cycle?
I think if the CI gets done, then it's a good solution
okay.
to make sure Kubernetes doesn't regress against popular charts. Maybe in a few weeks, if we need some help getting that going, then I may come back to SIG Apps and put out a call for help. But we're on track at the moment.
Okay. In terms of other SIGs that might have a stake in this as well, for example, SIG cluster ops, in terms of operators who are using charts for all their deployments, that would have been a serious issue for them. So there may be some collaboration that can be done as well there. So just we'll kind of keep that in mind. Let's see, what else could have gone better? More discussion around proposals and MN, which I believe is Michelle.
Yeah, that's me. So this is not necessarily a negative comment. It's just a thing that happened. So let me give a little context. When we first started this SIG, one of the things that we had discussed or planned on doing was discussing proposals in Kubernetes that related to SIG apps. And you'll see that there are several proposals that get tagged with the SIG apps tag. And so we haven't necessarily had those kind of long, like lengthy, in-depth discussions about proposals in this SIG. I don't know if that's because this group just isn't interested in doing that, or maybe we haven't set the right forum for those kinds of discussions, the right context for those discussions, and I'm kind of curious as to know how other people feel about this.
I'll share one thought. I also worked in the SIG auth, and the style there was that if we could resolve it on the issue, like, and it was converging, then it didn't ever get discussed in the video chat. And then if it got blocked, or people after a week or so and people felt like a face-to-face was going to be faster, then someone would say, let's do it in the SIG. And there was usually enough time on the SIG calendar. There was always room to have that type of ad hoc discussion. It was less crowded than SIG apps, where you sort of have to, in some cases, plan a couple weeks out to even get time on there. So two thoughts there is, as needed, and make sure there's room for those discussions when they come up, so it's not a long lead time.
Great point.
So if we had to encapsulate what the recommendation is, at least for the 1.6 timeframe, what would be the thing that we should look at focusing on as far as improvement there?
Maybe just tell people, like, if you feel like you would like to have a discussion on any issue in Kubernetes that affects SIG apps, feel free to put something on the agenda, and people should defer decisions if someone reasonably wants to talk about it here. I know that's a very big action item, but let people know it's an option.
So essentially claiming some space at the community level to raise awareness, is that?
And just making a formal statement like, hey, like SIG apps is the place to adjudicate controller and workload related stuff, and so use it.
Great. And if, just a FYI, if any of you need to add specific items to the community meeting, I've got edit access on that, so I can do that ahead of time if need be. So,
Can the agenda at least always have like comment access or suggest access, so people can just throw stuff on there asynchronously without tracking you down?
Yeah, absolutely, they can do that.
Jason's referring to the community document, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Our document has, everybody who has a link has edit access, and I've been waiting for that to bite us, but it hasn't yet, so we're okay until it does.
Great. Okay, that is, I believe, the last of the what could have gone better that are in the document. Is there anybody that wants to raise something ad hoc and we can just walk through it?
Hi, I'm Dilip from Huawei. So I raised a PR in Contrib GitHub repository for stateful set for Redis, and then it's been assigned to Ken Owens, but I've not got any feedback yet. So is that a better way to get some attention, or is it like if somebody could quickly take a look at the feedback and say that it's like really not up to the mark, because this is my first PR to Kubernetes community, so I would like to improve it. So I've not heard anything from the community. That's one thing, and the other one is that I would like an additional feature in stateful set. So there is an email chain going on within Huawei and some members in Google. I think Eric Tune is also part of that email. So the facility I want in stateful set is it possible to provide another hook, just like init containers, just after the pods are being started, for coordination? So what is the best place for me to put forth that proposal or request? Because I see plenty of issues being created in the actual Kubernetes project. So if I raise an issue, it could easily get lost.
Okay. Anybody from the community want to speak to that, Eric? Or
I'm aware of Dilip's proposal, and I am very backlogged, and it has not come up to the top of my queue yet. In terms of the review, if there's someone outside of, if the nature of the review is I'm using this for myself, tell me if I'm using best practices, that kind of puts it down in my queue. If there's other people saying, hey, I wish this thing, if someone else that's from a different org said, please check this in, I think I want this Redis, then we can expedite. And then it'd be good to understand, is there a Redis chart already? And why is it going to contrib? Or how does it differ from what's there? If that's already been answered in the poll, I apologize. To the issue of if you want a feature and you're not getting attention, I think that would be a good case to put something on the agenda and just say, I want 5 minutes to make my case for why this is useful. We'll talk about it face to face and make a decision in a future SIG apps.
Okay, yeah. So, in continuation to that, I've got another question. So, what's this contrib directory? What sort of things goes into contrib directory, and what sort of things should go to the charts? Because this, I think, it's not a chart; it's just a simple stateful set implementation. So, any people who would want to have a Redis stateful set should be able to simply do cf create f and then the YAML file. But if they don't want to use the charts, then this should that be a better place for me to raise the PR? Or
what's the reason for not wanting to use charts? The idea of charts is that it lets a maximum number of people with the fewest amount of command lines get something going and have additional sort of tooling around starting that app.
Okay, and this one also has some code which we wrote to simplify the Redis Sentinel. So this can be a part of the chart as well, or is it just the configuration file?
Is it a fork of code that belongs to the Redis project, or is it entirely your own code?
We wrote it from scratch.
Can someone speak to the best practices of where to store Scratch code that assists with a chart?
No.
I'm looking for someone who's a SIG apps regular to make a statement on where helper code belongs.
I mean, if it's like a direct modification of the Redis image itself, or if it's a direct modification of what happens, the behavior of the container, then that's obviously that's probably just a fork of the image itself, depending on the use case of it. But if it's like a modification of how the manifests are deployed, then that's probably something that can be done inside of the chart itself.
I mean, it sounds like it's a piece of compiled code that is a proxy for an application.
Then that's probably a fork. Honestly, I wouldn't be too aware of how that would be reflected unless we saw the actual code itself.
So maybe a suggestion, this is getting into kind of best practices and where is it documented and how we should do things. And so one of the things that we could probably do better in the future is actually document that stuff and have one place we say, come over here. And if there's a gap, you can do a pull request or, whatever the process is to fill that in. But at least we have a place that captures that.
Yeah.
I'm going to put that,
oh, sorry.
Put that in the action items, and I'd love for somebody to claim that as a how-to.
Yeah, I'd be happy to claim that as a how-to. We can put it in the Helm charts on authoring charts and forking charts and that kind of thing. I think that would be an awesome place to help those things.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, moving along here. We had a few things come up in chat. So I want to quickly recognize that there are a couple of extra what went wells that were added, and the attendance of the group went way up, which is fantastic. I have to say that having seen a crosscut of several SIGs, that this is one of the great active SIGs and seems to be making a huge positive impact. So congrats to you all on that. The time window really represents a change in focus toward collaboration between projects and SIG apps. That seems very true and great, and I'm so glad to see that. Anything else you want to add there, Matt?
No, and I can explain that last one, I guess, really quickly. That when we started off, SIG Apps felt like a lot of demos from a lot of different people, which was fabulous. I love seeing the demos. But then what has happened, particularly over this last little time window, is I've noticed a lot of cross-project collaboration. And so demos have turned into cooperation, which has turned into collaboration, which is really cool. I think that's my understanding initially when Michelle and Matt Farina started out this SIG was that was one of their goals. And I think that's one that's really on track to be realized, and that's cool to watch.
Yeah, I've seen that as well. It's amazing. This, as a community goes, SIG Apps could really be a bellwether for other SIGs in terms of how to do that process. So, going back to the what could have gone better, there's a couple items that came from chat. So, concern how we processed DS updates in 1.5 time frame. It should land. What we did not well, but it's already improved for 1.6, and that was Janoe, I believe. Do you want to speak to that? And actually have the next item as well. Oh, well, hopefully those are self-evident. Anybody else have feelings about these two items, the last ones? Okay, so let's get into what we can do differently for 1.6 and beyond. So regarding Helm, begin Helm plus 1.6 builds as soon as 1.6 beta 1 is released. Feel like that's true, not true? Seems to capture the spirit of what we need.
Yeah, I think that is, yeah, that I think sounds right to me. Okay. And in terms of action items for this, who is actually going to be responsible for ensuring that this happens, and what sort of mechanics do we need to put around this so that it actually has some teeth?
And when you're talking about like the action items for these, are you talking about the what could have gone better action items, or?
Yeah, so specifically begin the 1.6 builds as soon as 1.6 beta is released. Just ensuring that if we didn't do it last time and we want to do it next time, who's actually taking responsibility for that actually happens, and what kind of mechanics are around that?
Okay, specifically for the Kubernetes or for the Kubernetes Helm documentation updates, if a file an issue and I can comment on that and I can just tag that to my triage issue personally. For the other ones, I think just filing up a ticket and then trying to ping the person might be the easiest way to make them accountable.
Okay.
I think since I'm keeper of the Helm roadmap, it's probably my responsibility to make sure. And probably the best metric to make sure on this is that we are following the Kubernetes release estimated release time date on the on the Helm roadmap. Blah. All I really mean to say is that we have a release planned for the same time that Kubernetes 1.6 is planned.
Okay.
That keeps it front of mind for us.
And so in terms of the things that need to be done on the SIG app side or the Helm side, are you going to be responsible for delegating those out and kind of making sure that we're following the roadmap properly, or is there somebody else that you need help with to ensure that stuff, or how do we keep accountability there?
Yeah, I'll take point on that, and the Kubernetes. The Helm core team will collectively, since we collectively set the roadmap, will collectively ensure that we're on there.
Okay.
It would be nice to have someone from outside of Helm keep us accountable for this. If anybody feels like jumping in and taking that responsibility, I'd appreciate it, because I do think that part of the reason we skipped out on it last time was because we were just not keeping close enough tabs on what was happening upstream to always be paying attention.
Okay. Does anybody want to volunteer to help set a reminder to watch the project plan and the roadmap?
So it's just for the accountability for these items. If it is, then I could potentially take a look on the Helm side of things. I'm not sure if I have the amount of, I don't think I can be held accountable for all the Kubernetes dev side of things as well.
Okay. Great. Yeah, and I'm not trying to beat a dead horse on this. I just want to make sure that if we say we're going to do something, we have we're doing our best effort to make sure that it actually happens. Great. Okay, so obviously, Eric, you mentioned that we're going to start CI against head Kubernetes sooner, which is great. I put you as a action item since it sounds like you're already doing that. In terms of the discussions at the Kubernetes level, that sounds again like that's just individuals. There's no real specific to do there. And how-tos, Matt, you've already, and there's so many Matts. Matt Fisher, you've already stepped up to take that on, and I sincerely appreciate that. Are there any other items that people can think of that we need to do differently? Anything around testing or validation or integration with the community at large? Do we feel like SIG Apps is being represented enough at the community level? Do we? Is there any part of the agenda of the SIG that isn't clear that needs to be further clarified, or any of that stuff?
From my own personal point of view, I'm getting a little bit confused on the target of SIG Apps itself, because when I originally came to SIG Apps, I believed it was for specifically talking about applications built around Kubernetes and those kind of things, but I'm also starting to see a little bit more towards, it seems to be muddling up a little bit in the sense of it's also being Kubernetes development side of things, specifically towards features that are being added into Kubernetes and just talking about the design of those features. So it seems like there's some kind of Kubernetes development discussion happening as well in SIG Apps, which to me seems relevant, but at the same time, it doesn't seem like it's the core, or to my opinion, it doesn't sound like it's what was, or the original core message of SIG Apps, whether it's relevant to application developers or not. I'm not sure if development discussion is really productive to the majority of the people who are watching SIG Apps, at least from my perspective.
Okay. SIG leadership, Matt or Michelle, do you want to talk about that? Do you feel like there is a to-do here, or maybe something we should strive to further clarify the mission and purpose of the SIG to rein these conversations in? Or
I'll start, and then I'll let Michelle tell me where I'm wrong and correct here. The SIG was started to deal with those who are building apps and operating applications in Kubernetes. What that means, there's just the development of new tools, such as Helm and extensions and Compose and other things that help app operators do their job well, hopefully. And then there's features that we can also get into Kubernetes to try to improve that experience. And so as we learn, we'd like to be able to kind of enable improvement in that area. And so that does touch on Kubernetes features, as well as, best practices and all kinds of other things around operating those applications and building them to run well in Kubernetes. And you may be right that certain areas we may not be talking enough about as far as how do you do a good job of writing applications for Kubernetes and operating. Michelle, do you have anything you wanted to add?
Did a really good job. +1 all of that. Yeah, I The group kind of organically grew this way. We originally intentionally had your view, Matt Fisher, on what it was going to be, and it just kind of grew into this. And I think it's been helpful. And I'd like to see where it goes. But if anybody has concerns about, anybody else has concerns, if the majority of the group has concerns about this, I'd really love to hear about that.
This is not a concern, but I'll just say that like people comment earlier, SIG Apps is one of the more big and active SIGs. That would mean that it might be one that is actually ready for mitosis, you know? So that I've talked to Brian about that recently. He's very open to the idea of there being new SIGs that come as there's demand. What I see is that SIGs happen when they're like, it takes an entire community, but it also takes some leaders, like Matt and Michelle, who like just keep it going. And obviously the SIG is going to be centered around the leader's interests. So if there's someone that wants to lead a SIG with a different topic, I think they should, you know, bring that up. We're happy to help them, but they're going to need to like create that community themselves. But I think it's a good thing.
So one question that comes to mind about that, though, is so if you look at if you have the sphere of concerns that SIG Apps is primarily focused on, and there are things at the edges, and you look at where those things get pushed out into, so specifically Kubernetes development upstream that relates to applications, it's always good to wonder, okay, so if that gets pushed out of the SIG, where does it go? And is it enough gravity that it needs to create a new SIG, like you said, Eric, or is it something that could actually, we should expand the gravity of the SIG to encompass it? Because the thing that we don't want to see is for those things to just disappear or to not be covered or to be left in some sort of nebulous state. So just as a facilitator's commentary on that, I would say that would be something to look into, is just to identify those edge cases and see if there's enough room in the tent for those, or if it needs to be expanded into a different realm.
One thing I was going to suggest was, in a sense, this SIG is one of the few SIGs that actually has a number of smaller sub-SIG subgroups working together. The Helm team, which is, in a sense, a very self-directed component that works well. You have the app controller work, and then you do have like the parts that are Kubernetes components. One option might be to play around with sub-SIG, meetings for the supporting applications, like the deployment, stateful set, daemon set updates topics, and then one for Helm and one for some of the pieces, and then use the SIG more of a communication mechanism rather than some of the deeper technical discussions.
The way I think about this is when we did our 2017 planning, we had that doc, which started out at this very high level of abstraction. And I chose a lot of those yearly goals, and they were very consciously chosen to require cross-SIG collaboration to meet them. And so we're going to have a mixture of, very focused discussion, but we also have to make sure we set at least some goals every quarter that force us to collaborate. And I think we do okay at that. Yeah.
So how about this? Because we're talking about the idea of maybe sub-SIGs here too, just because we've naturally got that. And just bringing in so folks can collaborate and work together if there's a few people who want to go off on their own. But how do you meet? How do you come back and share that? If you want to throw an action at me, I am happy to craft together some doc and we can put that up in the community, because it says, hey, you're a sub-SIG of this. Here is just some stuff to help you get going.
Yeah. I think I'll do a mea culpa. Like, I've had a lot of I happen to work with people who are on storage, had a lot of conversations in the hallway with them about like what apps people need from storage. I expect those to turn into proposals. Maybe people are saying those should be had in SIGs so that even the collaborative part is, visible from the start. I'm not sure if that's the feedback that's being given.
Yeah.
So this is interesting because we've had some discussions about we had a few SIG leaders in the room talking about this, and there might be the notion of maybe there's a SIG as far as the machinery around the interest group, but there might be something or a space for special user groups as well. Like, so more informal, focused around a proposal, you get together, you break apart, like really just as part of the feature process, and not necessarily having all the groups and all the things that a SIG has tied to it, because I think Matt's comment about the human resources part is true for some people. A lot of us have many irons and many fires, so we don't want to exclude people because they don't have time. So making it as lightweight as possible might be a way to help facilitate that. But there definitely seems to be in this group the dynamic of many different, every application is its own ecosystem, and then you have the Kubernetes ecosystem on top of that. So there's probably going to be some innovation in terms of how SIGs and subgroups work here that is going to be of interest to the community at large.
I'm really open to hearing about what people take away from their weekly SIG Apps experience. Maybe that's better done in a form or survey. But I really want to know, why is it that people come? Because there's almost 40 people that come sometimes on a given meeting. Like, what do you take away? Is it just, are you just there for the first part? Are you just there for the end so you can ask your questions and leave? What topics interest people? Because I think that might inform, if there's some patterns there, that might inform possibly if we're covering too much, or if we need to split or want to go the sub-SIG route. I think that it's feedback and data that I really haven't gotten. I've only gotten really positive feedback about every particular part of the agenda, and I kind of want to know if all of it is relevant to everyone. Yeah.
Great. Michelle, I just put a to-do item in the actions for you to come up with that survey. Do you need any help from the community or anybody to help organize that? Or
I will start a thread about potential questions, and if you want to add questions, you can add to that thread, and then I'll send out a survey next week.
Great. Okay, great. Okay. So that brings us to the end of the deltas thus far. Is there anything anybody else wants to add? Okay. So this document, we're going to leave write access available for a period of time. Probably after a week or so, it'll get turned into a read-only document that will be shared, probably at one of the community meetings as well, hopefully. But in the time after this, it would be great to, if you think of anything else you want to add it in there, and make sure that your name is clear. So if you add it post facto, please add your full name and not just your initials, just so we know who did it, because there's a lot of Matts. Definitely add that, because we definitely want to keep this document as a living document. Also, just as a housekeeping thing here at the end of this retrospective, I would love to have some feedback from all of you. Was this valuable, and would you like to continue doing retrospectives?
So I'll speak up. This is Matt Farina. I guess I should say my full name. And I find this to be very valuable, because I really want to hear the feedback folks have. And while Michelle and I regularly catch up on things, hearing entirely different perspectives adds to our ability to help enable y'all. And so I'm really appreciative of this.
Any plus ones, minus ones? Anybody feel like this was a total waste of time? Please speak up. Cool. Okay, well, that concludes the first retrospective for SIG Apps for 1.5. I sincerely appreciate everybody's great participation and going along with me as we go through this process. Next retrospective, as we go through this, if there's anything anybody wants to change or make this more useful, please let me know, and we'll do that. I'm going to turn it back over to Matt and Michelle.
Thank you for doing this retrospective. I found it to be useful, and so thanks, everyone. And that is all that we had for this week's meeting. We just gave the whole meeting up for doing the retrospective. And so that's all we have. Did anybody, we've got 12 minutes left. Was there any last minute announcements or anything that anyone wanted to share for the week? The floor is open.
Butcher has a question. His question is, what's coming next week? Are we back to regular SIG apps? Sort of. I wanted to try something new. I wanted to see if it would be helpful to do demos and stand-ups on one week's meeting, and then still have the open forum at that meeting, but have the next meeting just for open forum. So we have some topics queued. Haven't lined up what exact topic we would kind of tackle that next meeting, but kind of want to try that out. If anyone's super opposed to it, let me know. I'm totally open to feedback, but next week it'll be demos and stand-ups for the most part in open forum.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, then everyone can have 10 minutes back. Thanks for coming and have a fantastic week. Talk to you all next week.
Bye, everyone. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.